on board K Ramakrishnan and really talk about this trend which has been hogging the markets of late. Mr. Ramakrishnan, great to have you on the show right now. Just wanted to get your sense in on what is it that you're making of this scurry that we're seeing for promoters to offload, say, stake and PE exits that's happening in blocks now.
I speak specifically from the FMCG sense. We are focused on the FMCG market in a way. So when you look at FMCG businesses, the entire thing about the resurgence of local brands is something that all brands are taking note of, and that is perhaps sparking off a jump start into what you're referring to.
Sure. We'll pick up the conversation from there. Apologies for that. Wanted to understand what is it that you're seeing in terms of, demands, because on one hand, it's the agri-commodity inflation, which is really sort of sapping the consumer out, and the consumer is getting price conscious, as we understand. But at the same time, when you look at the luxury end of the market, there seems to be boom time as ever. So wanted to understand this dichotomy that is actually playing out, not just within the FMCG sector, but the larger consumption basket as such as well.
Yeah. So the consumption behavior of India is more or less been what you would call as bipolar. On the one end, there is the lux segment, as you keep saying. So irrespective of whether there is inflation or pandemic or whatever the case may be, if there is an opportunity to spend, the most premium segment is continuing to spend. And that is reflecting across categories, be it automobiles, be it high-end hotels, be it travel, or be it FMCG as well. At the same time, there is another end of the spectrum, not even the other end, the middle to lower end of the spectrum is doing a lot of a balancing act in the light of the inflation that one is able to see. So if you specifically look at FMCG, I would seem to think that we are in a stage where there is a recovery being seen with urban markets showing positive growth almost to the extent of 5.5%. And the big news is that the rural market is definitely back. I mean, we went through very difficult times in the last couple of years, and we can see in the quarter ending June that certainly rural markets are back. So with rural being back, there's only positive times ahead that we can look at for the FMCG space as a whole.
Companies like Unilever, Marico, both highlighted alongside their Q1 commentary that they are seeing some stress on mass products, right, in some specific categories. Tell me, which are the categories which are seeing maximum pressure, if you could highlight that?
Yeah, so if you broadly split the sector of FMCG into, let's say, personal care, home care, and foods. Personal care is seeing growth, definitely. But within personal care, if you look at specific segments like soaps, toilet soaps, etc., there is a little bit of stress in terms of ability to grow from wherever it is. Home care is where the stress is actually the most, with the exception of utensil cleaners, fabric wash, or any of those are not seeing the kind of growths that are being seen in some of the other parts of the market. And then if you look at products, categories like floor cleaners, toilet, bathroom cleaners, etc., the tremendous growth that we saw during the pandemic, the categories have not been able to keep up with that growth, and the consumer spending is a little bit lax in that. So home care, a little dull. Personal care making a comeback. Foods coming back strongly. And if you look at foods, there was a lot of time, almost 2 years during the pandemic, when a lot of wheat was being given free to consumers, as a result of which the atta business was shrunk. However, even if you remove that atta, which will create an artificiality in terms of overall foods growth, we are seeing significant growth in the food space, largely driven by snacking, I would say, in all the top 3 categories of snacking showing significant growth. So that's the overall spectrum, if you see. So stress in home care to some extent, and some parts of personal care, and foods being growing significantly.
Right. Morning. I also wanted to understand, what the trend is when it comes to regional players as well. Because if we're looking at the Q1 trend that has been highlighted, it seems that, regional players as well are coming to the fore. Is that something that you've noticed? Is that something that you see, continuing into Q2?
So it's a big story, the whole concept of regional stroke local players. In this area, I just would like to clarify that this whole concept of local stroke regional players is more in the marketer's construct than in the consumer's construct. In the consumer's construct, is just another brand, whether it's national or otherwise. For 2 years, brands which could be classified as regional stroke local went through a lot of stress. The first stress was due to the pandemic, in which time what happened was there was an inability to connect stocks to the market in time, which the larger brands were comfortably able to do given their clout and distribution muscle and logistical infrastructure. Immediately after that was the war and the inflation period when input costs went through the roof. So when input costs went through the roof, the national stroke global brands had their ability to take up their prices further, whereas the ability of a local stroke regional brand is limited. So there were 2 consecutive years when the regional stroke local brands went through a tough time. So against that small base, if you look at a growth phase in the first half of this year, definitely we can see that the local stroke regional players have grown almost to the extent of 1.5 to 2 times the growth of the national brands. Is that a segment that is going to continue? Our belief certainly is that, because currently they are also playing in every segment that the national players are doing. And they're also exhibiting strengths in every area a national brand would have strength, like in the areas of innovation, in the areas of communication, in the areas of distribution strengths, and at the same time holding on to the prices as much as possible from their end. So all of these put together may make us strongly believe that this is perhaps the year for local and regional brands to make a stronger comeback than they did in the last 2 years.
And what could lead the comeback? I mean, will something extraordinary have to happen at a macro level? Or do you think it's just got to do with sentiment on street with regards to, our daily needs like tomatoes and onions?
So you're talking about the comeback of the regional...
Yes.
Yeah. So
across the board pretty much.
Yeah. So I'm saying they went through 2 years of being lower on base. So this is the time for that comeback, with the base being low and the fact that inflation is perhaps a little bit eased off, and to that extent input costs being whatever they are, and the consumer being far away from the pandemic, being a little more open to experimenting and trying out, adding brands to their portfolio in each category. So that gives an opportunity for the local brands and stroke regional brands to find their way back into the household basket, and therefore also into the retail stroke distribution basket. So that is the biggest trigger, the consumer openness to try more brands as we get far and farther away from the pandemic, and the fact that inflation has eased off. Both of these are big triggers for regional brands to come back. On top of this, add to the fact that there's a whole lot of inherent indigenous innovation that is coming from regional players as well. Just to give you some examples, I mean, if you look at a brand like Balaji Wafers is a very strong regional brand of snacks. At the same time, they launched a brand of noodles, and that went up to a penetration of as high as 30% in a state like Gujarat, and at the same time growing almost to the extent of 40 to 50%. So high penetration, high growth on the top of interesting innovation that they've done around noodles. There's several other examples like Teju Masala or Smart Bombs, and many of those. There are lots of local brands who are upping their game as far as innovation is concerned. So consumer willingness to try more, inflation easing off, and players upping their innovation game. All these are causes for regional stroke local brands to make their comeback strongly.
Right. Okay, great to have you then on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out, Mr. Ramakrishnan, helping us understand what really is going on with the FMCG sector. This bipolar nature that we are seeing in consumer behavior and when it's likely to see a recovery.